When the Zephyrian Hegemony's war fleet arrived at the edge of Earth's solar system, their sensors detected something impossible. The third planet from the star wasn't just inhabited, it was crawling with billions of sentient beings who had somehow survived their own technological adolescence. Most species either transcended to energy beings or wiped themselves out within a few millennia of discovering atomic power. Humans had done neither. Admiral Kethvar studied the tactical displays with growing unease. These creatures had turned their entire moon into a fortress. They had military installations on asteroids. They had weapons that could crack continents, and shields that could deflect solar flares. But what disturbed him most wasn't their technology, it was their response to his fleet's arrival. They weren't running. They weren't surrendering. They weren't even trying to negotiate. Instead, they had done something that defied every military doctrine in the known galaxy. They had politely asked the hegemony to wait while they prepared a proper welcome. 3 days later, when the hegemony deployed their most devastating weapon, a planet cracker capable of shattering worlds, humanity's response would redefine what it meant to be apex predators in a galaxy full of monsters. Sometimes, the most dangerous thing about humans isn't their capacity for violence. It's their capacity for creativity when violence becomes necessary. The quantum distortion detectors aboard the UES Vigilance screamed warnings across every frequency as reality folded in on itself just beyond Pluto's orbit. Captain Sarah Chun watched the main display with a kind of calm that only came from 30 years of military service, even as her bridge crew scrambled to make sense of readings that shouldn't exist. "Talk to me, Rodriguez," she called to her sensor operator, a young lieutenant whose fingers danced across holographic displays with practiced efficiency. "Ma'am, we're detecting massive spatial displacement. Whatever's coming through, it's big. Really big." Rodriguez's voice carried the weight of numbers too large to comprehend. Estimated mass displacement suggests multiple capital ships, each one at least 5 kilometers in length. Chun felt her stomach tighten. The Vigilance was humanity's most advanced deep space monitoring station, positioned at the edge of the solar system specifically to watch for this moment. For 2 centuries, humans had wondered if they were alone. Now they had their answer, and it was arriving with enough firepower to sterilize worlds. "Give me a direct line to Earth Command," Chun ordered. "Priority Alpha transmission, and prep the quantum beacon. If we don't make it out of this, someone needs to know what we're facing." The space around Pluto's orbit shimmered like heat waves rising from summer asphalt. And then they appeared. Ships that defied every principle of engineering Chun thought she understood. Organic curves flowed seamlessly into crystalline structures, while energy fields danced between hull sections that seemed to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously. The smallest of the vessels dwarfed Earth's largest battleships. 37 ships confirmed, Rodriguez reported, his voice steady despite the magnitude of what they were witnessing. "The largest? Jesus, Captain. It's nearly 20 kilometers long. Our computers are having trouble calculating its mass." Chun activated the ship-wide communications. "All hands, this is the captain. We are now in first contact with an alien fleet of unknown intentions. Follow protocols exactly. No sudden movements, no weapons activation without direct orders. We represent all of humanity in this moment." The largest ship moved with impossible grace for something so massive, positioning itself directly between the Vigilance and Earth. Chun could see weapons ports along its hull, each one easily capable of housing cannons larger than her entire ship. But what caught her attention was the complete lack of communication attempts. These beings weren't trying to talk. "Captain," called out communications officer Kim from her station. "We're receiving a transmission. It's imperfect English. Put it through." The voice that filled the bridge was neither male nor female, carrying harmonics that suggested multiple vocal cords working in coordination. When it spoke, each word was precisely articulated, as if the speaker had studied human language with scientific dedication. "Vessel designation unknown. You orbit the 3rd planet of this system. We are the advanced fleet of the Zephyrian Hegemony. Your species has been evaluated for incorporation into our territory. You have 72 standard hours to prepare your planet for harvesting. Resistance will result in immediate planetary sterilization. Acknowledgement is not required." The transmission ended, leaving the bridge in stunned silence. Chun looked around at her crew, seeing her own thoughts reflected in their faces. Harvesting, not conquest, not occupation, Harvesting. Rodriguez, can you give me detailed scans of their technology? Already working on it, ma'am. Their energy signatures are unprecedented. Whatever's powering those ships operates on principles we don't understand. But, Captain, there's something else. Long-range sensors are picking up movement throughout the system. It's not just this fleet. Chen's blood-chilled. Explain. There's smaller craft moving toward all of our outer colonies. Mars, the asteroid mining stations, the Europa research facility. It's coordinated, precise. They know exactly where everything is. The implications hit Chun like a physical blow. Humanity had been watched, studied, cataloged. This wasn't first contact. This was the culmination of a surveillance operation that had probably been going on for decades. Give me Admiral Reyes. Emergency protocols are now in effect. While Rodriguez worked to establish communication with Earth, Chen studied the alien fleet through the Vigilance's advanced sensors. The ships moved in formations that suggested both military precision and an understanding of space warfare far beyond human capabilities. But there was something else, something that nagged at the edge of her awareness. Captain, I'm detecting energy buildups on several of the vessels, reported her tactical officer, Commander James Liu. It looks like they're preparing to demonstrate their weapons. As if summoned by his words, one of the mid-sized alien ships turned toward a distant asteroid. Energy gathered along its hull in patterns that resembled neural networks, pulsing with light that existed in colors Chen's eyes couldn't properly process. When it fired, the beam that emerged wasn't the focused laser or particle stream she expected. Instead, it was something that seemed to unravel reality itself. The asteroid, easily the size of Manhattan, simply ceased to exist. Not destroyed, not vaporized, but erased from existence as completely as if it had never been there at all. Holy Mother of... Liu's voice trailed off as the implication sank in. Captain, that wasn't just a weapon. That thing deleted matter at the quantum level. The energy requirements for that kind of technology. Chen nodded grimly. I know. Send all sensor data to Earth immediately. Full spectrum analysis, energy signatures, everything. If we're about to be harvested, at least they'll know what they're facing. The communication system crackled to life as Admiral Reyes appeared on the main screen. The old man's weathered face showed the strain of someone who had just received the worst news possible. Captain Chun, I've been briefed on the situation. How much time do we have? 72 hours until they begin whatever they mean by harvesting. Admiral, their technology is beyond anything we've ever imagined. They just deleted an asteroid from existence. Not destroyed it. Deleted it. Reyes nodded slowly. Captain, I'm going to share something with you that's been classified at the highest levels. For the past 50 years, we've been detecting anomalous energy signatures throughout the solar system. We suspected we were being watched. 3 months ago, our deep space telescopes detected this fleet approaching. We've been preparing. Chun felt a surge of hope. Preparing how, sir? Project Mirror Shield. Every available resource, every brilliant mind on Earth and in the colonies. We've been building something, Captain. Something that might just give us a chance. Reyes paused, and for a moment his military composure slipped, revealing the human being underneath. Sarah, I need you to buy us time. Whatever it takes, keep that fleet from reaching Earth for the next 60 hours. Sir, with respect, we're one ship against 37, and they have weapons that can erase matter from existence. Reyes smiled, and Chun was surprised to see genuine confidence in his expression. Captain, you're not just one ship. You're humanity's first line of defense, and you're about to discover something that these aliens haven't figured out yet. Humans don't just fight to win. We fight to make sure our enemy remembers why they should have left us alone. The transmission ended, leaving Chun with more questions than answers. But one thing was clear, Earth wasn't going to surrender without a fight. She turned to her crew, seeing determination replacing fear in their faces. All right, people, we got 60 hours to hold the line against technology we don't understand, wielded by beings who think we're nothing more than resources to be harvested. Anyone have any objections to proving them wrong? The response was immediate and unanimous. Her crew had trained for this moment their entire careers, even if they'd never believed it would actually come. Now it was here, and they were ready. Chen settled into her command chair and began planning humanity's first military engagement with an alien species. She had no idea that within 72 hours, the Zephyrian hegemony would be forced to completely reevaluate their understanding of what it meant to be apex predators in a galaxy full of dangerous species. The harvest was about to begin, but the Zephyrians were about to learn that some crops fight back. Outside the viewports, the alien fleet continued its steady approach toward Earth, their ships moving with the confidence of predators who had never encountered prey capable of defending itself. Behind them, hidden in the shadow of Pluto, the Vigilance began broadcasting a signal that would reach every human military installation in the solar system. The message was simple. They're here. Prepare for war. In the depths of space, between the orbits of Mars and Jupiter, automated construction platforms that had been working in secret for 3 months suddenly accelerated their operations. Massive structures, each one precisely positioned according to calculations that had required the combined efforts of Earth's greatest physicists, began their final deployment phase. The Zephyrians had given humanity 72 hours to prepare for harvesting. They had no idea that humanity had been preparing for war for far longer than that. Captain Chun watched the alien fleet grow larger on her screens and smiled. The harvest was indeed about to begin, but it wasn't going to unfold the way anyone expected. Admiral Elena Vasquez stood in the command center buried 3 kilometers beneath the Rocky Mountains, watching displays that showed the disposition of forces across the entire solar system. Around her, the most brilliant military minds humanity had ever produced worked with desperate efficiency to coordinate a defense that everyone knew was impossible. Status report on Mirror Shield. She called out to Dr. Marcus Webb, the physicist whose theoretical work had made their desperate gamble possible. All primary arrays are online. Webb replied, his fingers dancing across holographic displays that showed energy readings in the petawatt range. The gravitational lenses are aligned, and the quantum field generators are operating at 97% efficiency. Admiral, I have to stress again that we've never tested this at full power. The energy requirements alone. Doctor, we're about to be harvested by aliens who can delete matter from existence. I think we're past the point of worrying about energy costs. Vasquez turned to her communications officer. Give me a direct line to every fleet commander in the system. It's time they knew what we're really fighting for. The main display shifted to show a tactical overview of human forces throughout the solar system. It was, by any reasonable measure, a pathetic showing. Humanity had 12 major warships, none larger than 800 meters. They had mining platforms converted to weapon platforms, research stations hastily armed with experimental weapons, and a collection of cargo haulers that had been retrofitted with whatever military hardware could be installed in the time they'd had. Against this, the Zephyrian fleet represented technology that was centuries, possibly millennia, more advanced. But Vasquez had learned something important during her 40 years of military service. Wars weren't won by the side with the better technology. They were won by the side that was willing to do whatever it took to survive. All fleet commanders, this is Admiral Vasquez. You've all been briefed on the alien threat and our response plan. What you haven't been told is the full scope of what we're attempting. Project Mirror Shield isn't just a defensive system. It's the most ambitious engineering project in human history, and it's based on a simple principle. If someone tries to break your planet, you make them break their own instead. The responses came in quickly from commanders throughout the system. Captain Martinez on the battleship Defiance, positioned near Jupiter. Commander Okafor leading the asteroid belt defense platforms. Captain Singh coordinating the Mars orbital fortresses, each one representing humanity's determination to make any victory cost more than the Zephyrians were willing to pay. Dr. Webb explained Mirror Shield to our commanders. They deserve to know what they're protecting. Webb stepped forward, his nervousness obvious despite his attempts to project confidence. For the past 3 months, we've been constructing a network of gravitational field generators positioned throughout the inner solar system. Each one is capable of creating localized distortions in space-time. When they work together, they can create what's essentially a mirror made of folded space. A mirror. Captain Martinez's voice came through the comm with obvious skepticism. Doctor, I've seen their weapons. They don't fire light beams. No, they don't. But they do fire energy, and energy follows predictable paths through space-time. If we can create the right kind of gravitational field, we can redirect any energy-based attack back at its source. The bigger the attack, the more energy we have to work with. Vasquez watched the faces on her screen as the implications sank in. Gentlemen, The Zephyrians are going to try to crack our planet with the most powerful weapon they have. When they do, we're going to send that energy right back at them. Commander Okafor leaned forward in his command chair. Admiral, even if this works, they'll adapt. They'll find another way to attack. Yes, they will. Which is why Mirror Shield is just the opening move. Dr. Webb, show them Phase 2. Webb's nervousness disappeared as he shifted into full scientist mode. Once we've demonstrated that their energy weapons can't touch us, they'll likely resort to kinetic attacks. Asteroids, ship ramming, physical projectiles. That's when we activate the real surprise. The display shifted to show a three-dimensional model of the solar system with thousands of small objects highlighted in blue. Each one appeared to be in orbit around various planets and moons, but their trajectories were anything but natural. For the past 50 years, our deep space mining operations have been placing small gravitational field generators on asteroids throughout the system. We told the miners they were for navigation or processing. That was a lie. They're weapons. Each one can accelerate its asteroid to a significant percentage of the speed of light and guide it with pinpoint accuracy. The silence that followed was profound. Captain Singh was the first to speak. How many? 14,736. Each one between 50 meters and 2 kilometers in diameter. All of them currently disguised as natural orbital debris. Vasquez smiled at the expressions on her commanders' faces. Gentlemen, the Zephyrians have been watching us for decades. They know about our ships, our weapons, our technology. What they don't know is that we've been turning our entire solar system into the largest weapons platform ever constructed. Every piece of space debris is a potential projectile. Every asteroid is a guided missile. Every moon is a fortress. Dr. Webb brought up another display, this one showing energy distribution patterns throughout human space. The power requirements for both Mirror Shield and the kinetic weapon network come from a source the aliens have overlooked. Our sun. We've been building solar collection arrays in the corona itself, harvesting energy at levels that would power our entire civilization for millennia. All of that power is now dedicated to making sure any species that tries to harvest us pays a price they'll never forget. The tactical display updated to show the Zephyrian fleet's current position. They had moved past Uranus and were approaching Saturn's orbit with the same steady confidence that had marked their arrival. Long-range sensors showed them maintaining formation, their weapons powered down, their shields at minimum strength. They were approaching what they saw as a harvesting operation, not a military engagement. Fleet status report, Vasquez called out. All human vessels are in position, came the response from her aide. The Vigilance is maintaining its position at the edge of the system, feeding us real-time intelligence on alien movements. All other ships are dispersed according to the defense plan, and our colonial installations, evacuated or hardened, depending on strategic value. Luna Base has been converted to a fortress. Mars Command is operating from underground bunkers. All asteroid mining platforms are now armed with the most powerful weapons we could install in the time available. Vasquez nodded. The evacuation had been the hardest part of the entire operation. Explaining to 3 billion colonists that they needed to either return to Earth or take shelter in hardened installations without revealing the true scope of the threat had required a level of deception that made her uncomfortable. But it had been necessary. If Mirror Shield failed, there wouldn't be anywhere safe in the solar system. Admiral, Dr. Webb called out. Long-range sensors are detecting energy buildups on several alien vessels. I think they're preparing to make a demonstration. Let them. The more power they put into their first shot, the more power we'll have to send back at them. Vasquez activated the system-wide communications. All stations, this is command. The enemy is preparing to show us what they think we're facing. I want every sensor recording, every shield generator at maximum power, every weapon system ready to fire on my command. Remember, we're not just fighting for Earth. We're fighting to show every hostile species in the galaxy that humans are not prey. The response came back from every human installation in the solar system. Acknowledge command. Ready to engage. On the main display, the Zephyrian fleet continued its approach toward Earth. Their weapons were charging to levels that human sensors had never recorded. Whatever they were planning to demonstrate, it was going to be powerful enough to crack continents. Vasquez felt a moment of doubt. Mirror Shield was based on theoretical physics that pushed the boundaries of human understanding. If they had made even a small error in their calculations, Earth would be defenseless against whatever the aliens were about to unleash. But doubt was a luxury she couldn't afford. Not now. Dr. Webb, final systems check on mirror shield. All field generators are online and synchronized. Gravitational lenses are aligned to within 0.001%. Quantum field stability is holding at optimal levels. Admiral, we're as ready as we're ever going to be. Excellent. Now we wait for them to make their demonstration, and then we show them what it means to threaten a species that spent 4 billion years learning how to survive. Outside, in the cold depths of space, automated systems throughout the solar system received final targeting data and prepared for the most ambitious military operation in human history. Every asteroid, every space station, every hidden weapon platform was now part of a coordinated defense network that spanned billions of cubic kilometers. The Zephyrians had come to harvest a primitive species that posed no threat to their expansion. Instead, they were about to discover that they had stumbled into a trap that had taken decades to prepare and would reshape the balance of power in their corner of the galaxy. Admiral Vasquez looked at the countdown timer showing the aliens' approach to Earth and smiled. In 6 hours, the Zephyrian hegemony would fire the most powerful weapon in their arsenal at what they thought was a defenseless planet. They were about to learn that the most dangerous thing about humans wasn't their capacity for violence. It was their capacity for turning violence into an art form. Admiral Kethvar studied the tactical displays aboard the hegemony flagship Inevitable Conquest, his 4 eyes tracking the movements of the primitive vessels scattered throughout the system. His species had conquered 17 star systems using the same methodical approach. Demonstrate overwhelming power, then begin systematic harvesting while the prey species cowered in terror. This system should have been no different. The bipedal creatures on the third planet had technology that was barely capable of interplanetary travel. Their largest vessels were pathetic by hegemony standards, and their weapons operated on principles that had been obsolete for millennia. Yet something about their response troubled him. Combat Coordinator Vashti, he called to his second-in-command. Analysis of the human response patterns. Vashti's elongated form shifted as she accessed her tactical displays. Admiral, their behavior is inconsistent with previous harvest operations. Standard procedure for primitive species is immediate capitulation or desperate, uncoordinated resistance. The humans have done neither. They have positioned their forces according to what appears to be a defensive strategy. Kethvar's mandibles clicked in annoyance. Explain. They have concentrated their forces at strategic points throughout the system rather than massing them for a single decisive engagement. Their smaller vessels are maintaining positions that would be optimal for coordinated strike operations. Most concerning, they have made no attempts at communication beyond initial monitoring. This was indeed troubling. Most species either begged for mercy or threatened destruction they couldn't deliver. The humans had simply acknowledged the hegemony's presence and then deployed their forces as if they were preparing for war rather than inevitable defeat. Show me their primary command vessel. The display shifted to show the small craft that had first detected their arrival. Sensors indicated it carried perhaps 200 beings, barely large enough to qualify as a destroyer by hegemony standards. Yet it had moved to a position that clearly indicated tactical coordination with forces throughout the system. Admiral, called out Navigation Specialist Yethvar, we are approaching the demonstration range. All weapon systems are charged to maximum capacity. Excellent. Target the largest moon of the third planet. Full power planet cracker bombardment. Let these creatures see what awaits their world. The Inevitable Conquest's main weapon began charging to levels that could shatter continental plates. Around the flagship, 6 other capital ships aligned their own planet crackers for supporting fire. The combined energy output would be sufficient to crack any world smaller than a gas giant. What Kethvar couldn't see from his position was the frantic activity taking place throughout the human fleet. On every ship, in every station, crews worked with desperate efficiency to implement the most ambitious defensive strategy ever attempted. Aboard the UES Vigilance, Captain Shun watched energy readings that defied comprehension. Rodriguez, tell me you're getting accurate readings on their weapon charge. Ma'am, if these numbers are correct, they're about to fire something with more energy than our sun puts out in a month, concentrated into a single beam. Dr. Webb, please tell me Mirror Shield can handle that level of power. Webb's voice came through the comm from his position on Earth with barely controlled excitement. Captain, that level of energy is exactly what we were hoping for. The gravitational field generators can redirect energy proportional to the input. The more power they put into this shot, the more power we have to send back. Chun felt her stomach tighten despite Webb's confidence. The mathematics were sound, but they had never tested the system against anything approaching this level of energy. If Mirror Shield failed, Luna would be destroyed, and Earth would face bombardment that could sterilize the planet. All stations, prepare for Mirror Shield activation. Full spectrum recording of all energy signatures. If this works, we're going to need to understand exactly how it worked. Throughout the solar system, gravitational field generators that had been disguised as navigation beacons and mining equipment suddenly synchronized their operations. Space itself began to bend in patterns that created the largest mirror ever constructed, spanning millions of cubic kilometers and focused on a single point just beyond Earth's orbit. The Zephyrian fleet fired their demonstration shot at Luna with confidence born of centuries of conquest. The combined energy beam that erupted from their planet crackers was a thing of terrible beauty, a stream of concentrated destruction that could have punched through the core of a small planet. It struck the gravitational mirror humanity had constructed and simply disappeared. For a moment, the silence across all communication channels was absolute. On both sides of the engagement, crews stared at displays that showed impossible readings. The most powerful weapon in the Zephyrian arsenal had vanished without a trace. Then, the energy reappeared, reflected back along its original path with perfect precision, and concentrated into a beam even more focused than the original. The physics involved required gravitational manipulation at levels that should have been impossible for any species that hadn't transcended physical existence. The reflected energy struck the Hegemony flagship with enough force to punch clean through their primary shields and hull armor. Secondary explosions rippled through the massive vessel as its own weapons' energy tore through critical systems. The inevitable conquest, pride of the Hegemony fleet, was crippled by its own attack. Admiral Kethvar picked himself up from the deck of his ruined bridge, his 4 eyes struggling to process what his instruments were telling him. Half of his command crew was dead. His primary weapon systems were destroyed. His shields were failing. And somehow, impossibly, a primitive species had turned his most powerful weapon against him. Damage report. He managed to croak through his translator. Admiral, primary systems are offline. Hull breaches on 17 decks. The main reactor is operating at 12% capacity. Estimated time to full system failure, 6 hours. Kethvar stared at the tactical display, showing the human positions throughout the system. They hadn't moved. They were still maintaining their defensive positions, waiting to see what the Hegemony would do next. Waiting as if they knew something he didn't. Combat Coordinator Vashti, analysis of what just occurred. Vashti's voice was steady despite the chaos around them. Admiral, the humans have constructed some form of gravitational focusing array throughout their system. They used our own weapons' energy against us. The level of technological sophistication required for such a feat suggests we have seriously underestimated their capabilities. Impossible. Our intelligence indicates their technology is primitive. Admiral, with respect, our intelligence appears to have been incomplete. No primitive species could construct gravitational manipulators of this scale. The energy requirements alone would demand antimatter generation capabilities. Kethvar felt something he hadn't experienced in decades of conquest. Uncertainty. The Hegemony had built its expansion on the simple principle that technological superiority guaranteed victory. No species had ever successfully resisted their planet crackers. No species had ever turned their own weapons against them. Sir, called out the communications specialist. We're receiving a transmission from the human fleet. Put it through. The voice that came through the speakers was calm, professional, and carried undertones of barely controlled laughter. Hegemony flagship. This is Admiral Vasquez of the Earth Defense Force. We note that your demonstration appears to have gone differently than expected. We're prepared to discuss terms for your withdrawal from this system. Ketvar's mandibles clicked furiously. Withdrawal? These primitives were offering him terms as if he were a defeated enemy rather than a conqueror who had suffered a minor setback. Human Admiral, you have displayed unexpected defensive capabilities. However, your gravitational manipulation system cannot protect you from all forms of attack. We possess kinetic weapons that do not rely on energy projection. Vasquez's response came back immediately. Admiral Kethvar, we're quite aware of your kinetic capabilities. We've been monitoring your fleet composition since you entered our system. 14 dreadnoughts, 23 cruisers, and various support craft, all equipped with mass drivers and kinetic bombardment systems in addition to your energy weapons. We've prepared for those contingencies as well. You know our names? The fact that these creatures had somehow identified him personally was almost as disturbing as their defensive technology. Admiral, we've been monitoring galactic communications for decades. We know quite a lot about the hegemony's operations. We know you've conquered 17 systems. We know your standard tactics. We know you've never faced serious resistance before. What you don't know is that we've spent the last 50 years preparing for exactly this scenario. Kethvar studied his tactical displays, trying to identify what he was missing. The human fleet was still maintaining defensive positions throughout the system. They hadn't launched attacks on his damaged ships. They were behaving as if they held all the advantages in this engagement. Admiral Vasquez, your defensive system is impressive, but it cannot protect your entire planet. We will simply target multiple locations simultaneously until we overwhelm your gravitational array. Feel free to try, Admiral. But before you do, I'd like to point out something your sensors might have missed. Computer, show our guest what he's really facing. The transmission included tactical data that made Kethvar's blood freeze. Every piece of space debris in the system, every asteroid, every minor planetary body was now highlighted with targeting solutions that trace back to the human positions. Thousands of objects, each one on a trajectory that would intersect with hegemony ships if they were accelerated to combat velocities. Admiral Kethvar, you're currently surrounded by the largest kinetic weapons array ever constructed. Every rock in this system is now a guided missile. Every piece of debris is a potential projectile. If you'd like to test our kinetic defenses, we'd be happy to demonstrate why threatening Earth was a mistake. For the first time in his military career, Admiral Kethvar faced an enemy that seemed genuinely confident in their ability to destroy his forces. The humans weren't bluffing. They weren't desperate. They were offering him a chance to withdraw because they were certain they could win if he refused. Admiral Vasquez, the hegemony does not retreat from primitive species. Admiral Kethvar, we're not a primitive species. We're apex predators who have spent 4 billion years learning how to survive. You made the mistake of treating us like prey. Now you get to learn why that was an error in judgment. The communication ended, leaving Kethvar alone with his thoughts and his damaged flagship. Around him, the hegemony fleet waited for orders while thousands of human weapons maintained their targeting locks. For the first time since beginning his military career, the admiral of the hegemony's 7 Conquest fleet was genuinely uncertain about the outcome of an engagement. The harvest was supposed to have been routine. Instead, it was becoming the first military defeat in hegemony history. And they hadn't even begun fighting yet. Admiral Kethvar stood in his ruined command center, studying tactical displays that showed a situation no hegemony commander had ever faced. His flagship was crippled, his fleet was surrounded by thousands of potential kinetic weapons, and he was receiving casualty reports from a demonstration that was supposed to have terrified his enemies into submission. Fleet status report, he demanded from his surviving tactical officer. Admiral, the inevitable conquest has lost primary systems. 6 other vessels report damage from reflected energy feedback. The humans somehow synchronized their gravitational array to redirect our entire bombardment back at us. The officer paused, accessing additional data. Sir, energy analysis of their defensive system indicates technological capabilities that exceed our current understanding of applied physics. Kethvar's 4 eyes focused on the human fleet positions. They remained exactly where they had been when his fleet arrived, maintaining defensive formations that suggested they had anticipated everything that was happening. It was as if these creatures had war-gamed this exact scenario. Combat coordinateur Vashti, prépare kinétique bombardement. Target their gravitational field generators. If we can destroy enough of them, their mirror system will collapse. Admiral, with respect, our targeting data on their field generators is incomplete. They have disguised them as standard navigation and mining equipment throughout the system. We could spend days trying to identify and destroy the correct targets. Then we target everything. Prepare full kinetic bombardment of all human installations. Every asteroid, mining platform, every navigation beacon, every piece of equipment larger than a cargo pod. Saturate the entire system. Vashti hesitated before responding. Sir, that level of bombardment would require us to use every kinetic weapon in the fleet. If the humans have additional defenses we haven't identified, we would be left with only our energy weapons, which they have already proven they can counter. Kethvar's mandibles clicked in frustration. Every decision tree led to the same conclusion. He was fighting an enemy that had prepared for contingencies he hadn't considered possible. But the hegemony had not built an empire by being cautious. Execute the bombardment. All ships, full kinetic assault on human positions. The hegemony fleet began launching kinetic projectiles at velocities approaching significant percentages of light speed. Tungsten penetrators, guided asteroids, and exotic matter projectiles streaked toward human positions throughout the solar system. It was the largest kinetic bombardment in hegemony military history, designed to overwhelm any possible defense through sheer volume of fire. Admiral Vasquez watched the incoming barrage on her tactical displays with the calm of someone who had anticipated exactly this response. All stations initiate asteroid storm protocol. Full network activation. Throughout the solar system, gravitational field generators that had been dormant for decades suddenly came online. Every piece of space debris larger than a basketball began accelerating toward predetermined intercept points. Mining platforms that had been disguised as civilian installations revealed themselves to be fortress-scale weapon systems. Research stations activated point defense networks that had been built into their superstructures from the beginning. The sight was unprecedented in recorded galactic history. Thousands of asteroids, ranging from pebbles to small moons, suddenly began moving with purpose and precision. Each one followed a trajectory calculated to intercept incoming hegemony projectiles or strike hegemony ships directly. The entire asteroid belt became a coordinated weapon system. Captain Chin watched from the Vigilance as the largest display of coordinated firepower in human history unfolded around her. Rodriguez, are you getting readings on our kinetic network coordination? Ma'am, the targeting solutions are being calculated in real time by quantum computers distributed throughout the system. Every asteroid is tracking multiple targets simultaneously. The computational power required for this level of coordination. Rodriguez paused, reviewing his displays. Captain, they've turned our entire solar system into a single weapons platform. The first hegemony kinetic projectiles began striking human targets, only to discover that what they thought were mining platforms were actually armored fortresses with defensive capabilities that have been hidden for decades. Weapons that should have been able to penetrate any defense were stopped by shields operating on principles the hegemony didn't recognize. Simultaneously, human kinetic weapons began striking hegemony ships. Asteroids accelerated to combat velocities slammed into vessels designed to withstand energy weapons, but not impacts from multi-kilometer rocks moving at relativistic speeds. The hegemony's superior hull armor meant nothing when faced with the kinetic energy of small moons. Admiral, called out his tactical officer in a voice approaching panic. We're losing ships. The humans have converted every piece of debris in this system into guided missiles. Our kinetic bombardment is being intercepted by coordinated asteroid strikes. Kethvar watched his tactical display as it updated with casualty reports. The cruiser Dominant will have been struck by 3 asteroids simultaneously and was breaking apart. The dreadnought Manifest Destiny was listing badly after a collision with what sensors identified as a metallic asteroid that had clearly been artificially guided to its impact point. How many kinetic weapons do they have? Admiral, our computers are having difficulty calculating exact numbers. Conservative estimates suggest at least 14,000 individual projectiles under active guidance. They appear to be using gravitational manipulation to accelerate asteroids throughout the system. 14,000 guided kinetic weapons. The number was staggering. The entire hegemony fleet carried perhaps 3,000 kinetic projectiles, and they had expended most of them in the opening bombardment. Somehow, these humans had turned their entire solar system into an ammunition depot. Sir, Vashti called out from her damaged station. Long-range sensors are detecting movement from the outer system. Additional human forces are approaching from beyond Neptune's orbit. The tactical display updated to show new contacts moving in system. But these weren't ships. They were asteroids, each one the size of a small city, all of them accelerating at rates that suggested artificial propulsion. As Kethvar watched, targeting data appeared on his displays indicating that these massive projectiles were aimed directly at his fleet. Admiral Vasquez, he transmitted on open channels. This bombardment serves no strategic purpose. You cannot hope to destroy our entire fleet with kinetic weapons. Vasquez's response carried the confidence of someone who held every advantage in a tactical situation. Admiral Kethvar, we're not trying to destroy your fleet. We're demonstrating why attacking Earth was a mistake. Every projectile you've fired at our positions has been intercepted or absorbed by defensive systems you didn't know existed. Meanwhile, you've lost 7 ships to guided asteroid strikes. Would you like us to continue this demonstration? Kethvar looked at his casualty reports. 7 ships destroyed, 12 more heavily damaged, and the engagement had lasted less than an hour. At this rate, his entire fleet would be crippled before they could inflict any meaningful damage on human installations. What do you propose? Withdraw from this system and inform the hegemony that Earth is not available for harvesting. In exchange, we'll allow your surviving ships to depart unmolested. The hegemony does not negotiate with species marked for harvest. Admiral, the hegemony has never encountered a species capable of defending itself at this level. We're not marked for harvest. We're apex predators who have spent centuries preparing for exactly this scenario. Your choice is simple. Withdraw now, or we'll demonstrate why threatening a species that has weaponized an entire solar system was the last mistake your fleet will ever make. Kethvar studied the tactical situation one more time. His fleet was outgunned, outmaneuvered, and surrounded by weapons they couldn't counter. The humans had demonstrated defensive capabilities that exceeded hegemony technology and offensive capabilities that dwarfed anything in their arsenal. But the choice was not his alone. The hegemony's military doctrine was clear. Retreat was not an option until all combat capabilities were exhausted. Tactical officer, prepare our remaining energy weapons. All ships, concentrate fire on the human homeworld. If we cannot destroy their defensive systems, we will target their planet directly. Well, Vashtista interrupted. Sir, if their gravitational mirror system can redirect our weapons back at us, concentrating our fire will only result in concentrated energy being reflected back at our fleet. Then, we will test the limits of their system. Full power bombardment. All remaining energy weapons. Target the 3rd planet. The surviving ships of the hegemony fleet began charging their energy weapons for what would either be a devastating bombardment or an equally devastating reflection. Around them, human kinetic weapons continued their precise targeting, and the massive asteroids from the outer system continued their steady approach. Admiral Vasquez watched the energy buildups on hegemony ships with something approaching satisfaction. Dr. Webb, can Mirror Shield handle the energy output from their remaining fleet? Admiral, they've lost their most powerful ships. The remaining energy output is well within our system's capacity. In fact, we can focus the reflection more precisely than we did with their first demonstration. Excellent. Target their flagship specifically. When they fire, I want all of their energy sent directly back at Admiral Kethvar's position. Understood, Admiral. Mirror Shield is configured for precision reflection. Throughout the solar system, gravitational field generators adjusted their configurations to create a focusing array that would concentrate the incoming energy into a beam powerful enough to vaporize a capital ship. The hegemony was about to learn that the more force they brought to bear against humanity, the more force would be turned against them. The harvest had become a slaughter. But it wasn't humanity that was being harvested. The hegemony fleet's final energy bombardment lit up the space around Earth like an artificial star being born. Every remaining ship poured their maximum power output toward the blue-green world that had defied their conquest, creating a beam of concentrated destruction that should have boiled oceans and cracked continental plates. For a moment that stretched across eternity, that energy simply vanished into the gravitational mirror humanity had constructed around their homeworld. Then it reappeared, focused, and concentrated into a lance of pure annihilation aimed directly at the hegemony flagship. Admiral Kethvar had perhaps 3 seconds to comprehend what was happening before his own weapon's energy, amplified and focused by human technology, struck the inevitable conquest. The massive dreadnought simply ceased to exist, vaporized so completely that not even debris remained to mark where it had been. The surviving hegemony ships found themselves facing a stark reality. Every weapon they possessed had been turned against them. Energy weapons were redirected by gravitational mirrors. Kinetic weapons were intercepted by guided asteroids. Their technological advantage had become their greatest vulnerability. This is Admiral Vasquez. To all hegemony vessels came the transmission that would reshape galactic politics forever. You have 30 minutes to power down your weapons and prepare to receive boarding parties. Any ship that attempts to flee will be destroyed by our outer system kinetic platforms. Any ship that attempts to attack will be destroyed by their own weapons. Your harvest operation is over. Aboard the surviving hegemony cruiser Eternal Dominance, Acting Fleet Commander Vashti stared at displays showing tactical readings that defied everything she thought she knew about warfare. In less than 2 hours, the most powerful fleet in hegemony space had been reduced to 12 damaged vessels, surrounded by an enemy that controlled every aspect of the battlefield. Communications. Open a channel to the human fleet. Acting Commander Vashti to Admiral Vasquez. We request terms for surrender. The response came back with professional courtesy that was somehow more unsettling than threats would have been. Acting Commander, we're prepared to accept the surrender of your fleet. However, this engagement has implications that extend far beyond the system. We need to discuss what happens next. What happened next would establish Earth as the most feared military power in known space. Over the following days, as human forces secured the surrendered hegemony ships and began studying their technology, Admiral Vasquez found herself conducting the most important negotiations in human history. Not just for the fate of the captured fleet, but for humanity's place in a galaxy that had suddenly been forced to recognize a new apex predator. The interrogations of captured hegemony personnel revealed the scope of their empire and the scale of their operations. 17 conquered systems, billions of enslaved beings, and a military doctrine based on the assumption that no species could resist their technological superiority. Earth had shattered that assumption completely. Dr. Webb, Vasquez called during one of their strategy sessions. Analysis of captured hegemony technology. Admiral, their technology is sophisticated but specialized. They've focused entirely on offensive capabilities because they've never faced meaningful resistance. Their ships are powerful but fragile. Their weapons are devastating but inflexible. They've built an empire based on intimidation rather than tactical adaptability. And our technology compared to theirs? Webb smiled with the satisfaction of a scientist whose theories have been proven under the most extreme conditions possible. Admiral, in terms of raw power, they exceed us significantly. But we've spent decades developing technology specifically designed to counter superior forces. Our gravitational manipulation systems are more advanced than anything in their database. Our kinetic weapons network is beyond their comprehension. We've built a military doctrine around defeating enemies who should be able to defeat us. The strategic implications were staggering. Humanity had not only survived first contact with a hostile alien civilization, they had completely defeated a fleet that represented the pinnacle of that civilization's military power. The psychological impact on other species would be profound. Communications Officer Kim, status on our galactic broadcast preparations? All systems ready, Admiral. We can transmit on all known frequencies used by spacefaring species throughout this region of the galaxy. Vasquez nodded. The message they were about to send would announce humanity's presence to every civilization within 50 light years. It would also serve as a warning to any species that might consider Earth a potential target for conquest. Begin transmission. The message that went out from Earth was simple, direct, and would be remembered for millennia. This is Admiral Elena Vasquez of the Earth Defense Force, broadcasting on behalf of humanity. 72 hours ago, the Zephyrian hegemony attempted to harvest our world and enslave our species. Their fleet has been destroyed or captured. We now possess detailed intelligence on hegemony operations, including the locations of their conquered systems and the identities of their enslaved populations. To all species currently under hegemony control, liberation fleets are being prepared. To all independent species considering expansion into human space, we are not available for conquest. To the hegemony leadership, you have 48 standard hours to begin negotiations for the release of all enslaved populations, or we will demonstrate why threatening Earth was the greatest strategic error in your empire's history. The response from across the galaxy was immediate and profound. Species that had hidden from the hegemony for centuries suddenly had hope. Independent civilizations began reaching out to establish diplomatic relations with the humans who had accomplished the impossible. Most importantly, Intelligence networks throughout hegemony space reported massive disruptions as enslaved populations began organizing resistance movements. The hegemony's response came exactly 47 hours and 33 minutes later. This is Supreme Admiral Kolthak of the Zephyrian hegemony, responding to human ultimatum. The hegemony does not negotiate with primitive species. Your victory over a single fleet means nothing. We possess thousands of ships across 17 systems. You have demonstrated unusual defensive capabilities, but you cannot project force beyond your own system. You are trapped on a single world, threatening an empire that spans the galaxy. Vasquez smiled as she prepared humanity's response. The hegemony leadership still didn't understand what they were facing. Dr. Webb, status on our interstellar capability demonstration. All systems are ready, Admiral. Project Stargate is fully operational. Project Stargate was humanity's most classified development, made possible by the same gravitational manipulation technology that had created Mirror Shield. Using principles that pushed the boundaries of theoretical physics, human scientists had developed a method for creating artificial wormholes stable enough for fleet-scale military operations. Supreme Admiral Kolthak, thank you for your response. We anticipated your position, which is why we prepared a demonstration. Please observe your fleet positions in the Kepler 442 system. What the hegemony leadership saw next would end their empire forever. In the Kepler 442 system, over 400 light-years from Earth, space suddenly twisted into an impossible configuration. A hole in reality opened, revealing the blackness of space on the other side. Through that hole came a fleet of human vessels, their hulls gleaming with technology that incorporated the best of human engineering with captured hegemony systems. The hegemony fleet guarding Kepler 442 found themselves facing weapons they recognized, their own energy cannons, integrated into human ships that could redirect any attack back at its source. Kinetic weapons that used hegemony acceleration technology, but human guidance systems that could hit targets with impossible precision. Most terrifyingly, gravitational manipulation systems that could create artificial black holes as weapons of war. The battle lasted 18 minutes. When it was over, the entire hegemony garrison had been destroyed or captured, and the enslaved population of Kepler 442 was free for the first time in 2 centuries. Supreme Admiral Kolthak, this demonstration was conducted with 1/10 of our available fleet strength. We can open wormholes to any system in your empire. We can project force anywhere you have assets. Your choice is simple. Begin immediate negotiations for the release of all enslaved populations, or we will liberate them ourselves. Either way, the age of hegemony expansion is over. The surrender came 6 hours later. Over the following months, humanity negotiated the dissolution of the hegemony empire and the liberation of enslaved species across 17 star systems. The process was complex, requiring the establishment of new governmental structures, the repatriation of displaced populations, and the creation of defense treaties to prevent future conquests. Through it all, Earth emerged as the dominant military power in their region of the galaxy. Not because they sought conquest, but because they had demonstrated that any species attempting to conquer others would face immediate and overwhelming retaliation. The galaxy had learned a new rule. Apex predators were not determined by the size of their fleets or the power of their weapons. They were determined by their willingness to do whatever was necessary to protect what they valued. Admiral Vasquez stood in her command center, now expanded into a facility that coordinated military operations across multiple star systems and reflected on how completely the galaxy had changed. Humanity had been alone in the universe for all of recorded history. Now they were the founders of the first truly free galactic alliance, protectors of species they had never heard of 6 months ago, and the undisputed military power in known space. The harvest had indeed taken place, but it wasn't humanity that had been harvested. It was an entire empire that had learned too late that some prey are actually apex predators in disguise. Outside her windows, construction continued on the massive orbital platforms that would serve as humanity's primary fleet bases for their new role as galactic protectors. Earth had been threatened with destruction. Instead, they had inherited the stars. The universe was vast, ancient, and full of species that had spent millennia learning how to survive in a hostile galaxy. But none of them had spent 4 billion years learning how to turn survival into an art form. That was uniquely human.